Hi, Dave.
Hey, Robin, how are you?
I'm doing very well. How are you?
I'm good. Well, I'm curious what time it is for you over there. It's 3 p.m. for us on Friday, September 30th.
Yep. Well, actually, as you may remember, I'm actually in New Jersey at the moment.
That's right. You're in New Jersey. Okay, so it's
So
6
you don't
p.m. your
have to
time.
have
That's
any
right.
kind of feel bad about me at all. It's 6 o'clock.
6 o'clock. Okay, yeah. We had quite the schedule of a lot of international podcasters, and I honestly couldn't remember if you were in the States here or you were in Australia. So thank you so much, Robin, for taking part and representing yourself, your podcast, your message, and the country of Australia in International Podcast Day 2016. We'll let you introduce yourself, and you'll be on your way. I'll be behind the camera if you need anything, but you have 55 minutes to share your message.
Okay, Dave, I might call you. I might need you.
Okay, yeah, myself or Steve will be around.
I know. Thank you. You're both so kind. Okay. Well, I would like to start by letting people know how come I'm here, which is such a lovely story. And it's really the generosity of you, Dave and Steve. So a couple of days ago, I shared a tweet, two posts actually. One was a post that I'd written about how I really enjoy podcasting and what it means to me and what I've learned about podcasting. And then another one was actually a podcast that I recorded, which was to talk about the things that I really found most valuable and what I'd been learning as a podcaster. And so I got a message from Dave saying that he really enjoyed the post that I'd shared on Twitter, and there had been some shuffling and there was a vacancy, and would I be willing to be part of International Podcast Day? So it was like, well, why wouldn't I? This feels such an honor. So I'm very, very grateful, and I've been very excited to be able to kind of come on, and I've been listening since yesterday, and I'm truly inspired, and I've heard so much stuff that is really rings true for me about how we can get our message out, how we're learning, how we're growing, how we're developing relationships. So there's all such cool stuff, and to really I just feel like, I'm back part of this community, which is just awesome. So I thought I'd say a little bit about my name. You see me up as Robbie Cat, and when I signed into Fire Talk, I used my Twitter handle, and so that is Robbie Cat, but my name's Robin Stratton Burkessel, and it's a long name, and there's a story around that. But Robbie Cat came about because when I joined Twitter, I don't know, it was as early as 2009, I didn't think I'd take it very seriously, so I didn't really want to be identified. And so I picked the name Robbie Cat, which had been my name when I was playing Second Life. And I don't know if anyone in the audience had any experience with Second Life, but that was kind of the persona that I took on, Robbie Cat in Second Life. And so it stuck with me. And the really funny thing is, and I wasn't conscious at the time, but Robbie my name's Robin, and I get called Robbie. My middle name is Catherine, so the cat works, and I didn't do that consciously. And I just love cats, so kind of Robbie Cat works for me. So that's the background to that piece of the story. So I am Australian, and I'm living in New Jersey at the moment, about 50 miles south of New York City. And so I've been here for some time. My husband's American, and that's why I'm in the States. And I obviously love going back to Australia when I can. I'm here on my own, and this is unusual for me because I have a podcast show, obviously, and my podcast show is called Positivity Strategist, and it's actually an interview show. So I love, or conversational show, so I really love talking to people and making inquiries and kind of creating and generating conversation together. So this is unusual for me to have to kind of keep speaking, but I do actually a number of podcasts on my own, and I also am a speaker, so it's not quite foreign to me. But anyway, let me say a little bit about the podcast and the background and why I created it. And I really would love you to jot down any comments that you have in the chat space. I'm looking there, and I would love you to ask questions, comment, so that we can kind of enter into some kind of conversation here, if that's possible. So with the podcast is called Positivity Strategist. And so the intention of Positivity Strategist is to talk with people who are using the sciences of positivity, positive psychology, strength-based approaches to human transformation development, organizational transformation and development, community transformation and development. So what are some of the approaches that we can use so that we begin to co-create the world that we most desire, where we are focusing on what works for us, what inspires us, what our best capacities are. So it's really a strong focus on what is possible rather than the kind of deficit-based thinking and practices that we kind of grow up with from when we're young kids. So that's what I focus on. And I'm really very committed to creating a community of change agents, positive change agents. You know, when we are in touch with our own agency and we can spread that around, then we have an impact to be able to help others become positive change agents. Thank you, Gina, for saying a beautiful focus. I appreciate that. So I would love to hear more about, you know, how you're also perhaps using these positivity strategies in your life. So that's a lovely encouragement. Thank you. The audience. So let me also say that, you know, positivity is a science, and it's not just about positive thinking. So a lot of people think, oh yeah, you know, positive thinking, that's really great. It's much more grounded. It's really associated with neuroscience, positive emotions. It really just changes at the cellular level, and I'll kind of go into that. The focus of this presentation, I guess, that I'm doing here today is really tapping into this state of curiosity and appreciation, which are two positive states. And so my sense as a podcaster, when we come to it from a place of inquiry, where we're really curious about the people that we're talking to, the people that we're addressing, the message that we have, that opens us up to kind of being open to all kinds of possibilities and all kinds of messages that we are open to receive. So curiosity is a really significant state that I experience, and I would like to propose that as podcasters, that could be a very valuable state to be in. And the appreciation is linked to the framework that I do most of my work in, and I'll come back to that too in a little while. So when we're in a state of, thank you, that's my significant other giving me the thumbs up, who is also my muse and my great helper and helps me with podcasts, and I'll come to that story too. But so the state of appreciation is really significant, because if you think about it, we like to appreciate our assets, right? So when our assets appreciate, they grow. And when we focus on growing our assets, whatever they be, whether they be tangible assets or our own capacities, our own networks, our own communities, whatever they are, when we show appreciation, they do grow. So there's that double entendre with appreciation, showing appreciation for ourselves, showing appreciation for others, showing appreciation for life. And then when we focus on it, it actually does grow. So they're the two kind of things I'd like us to have a conversation around: the state of curiosity and this state of appreciation. Yes, Samuel, when we appreciate our assets, they do grow. Yes, I'm totally with you. So my audience, and I've alluded to, I've got a couple of talking points here that I want to make sure that I cover off, because I am known to go off on tangents too. That my audience generally, in the listeners that I have for Positivity Strategists, are people who do see themselves as change agents. And they come in all shapes and sizes and colors from all over the world. I have a global audience, and I think we all do as podcasters, and that's one of the great assets of podcasting, where we can be so, so passionate about our message and be there for other people, and know that we have a wide global audience that we're tapping into and learning from. So I'm also my audience is also comes from business, so that could be leaders in business, in corporations, in communities. It could be in healthcare. I have people who are in education, people who are writers, facilitators, and I do a lot of coaching and training in this field of helping people focus on the positive in their language. So how they actually can rewrite their materials or focus their question sets on how to bring out the best in people. Because this methodology that I use, it's not mine, it's one that I have learned and I've studied to gain a certificate in positive organization, change and development, and positive business and society, is called Appreciative Inquiry. And so that's the frame of reference that I come to when I engage with people in interviews, on my podcast, in the writing that I do, and in the work that I do. So, and this is a methodology, and it has a structure to it, and it's also very organic. The main focus is it's strongly relational, and so the presupposition is that everything happens in relationship. So it's through relationship that we co-create our worlds. So in conversation with people, if we come from this place of curiosity and an open mind, then together we can create new states. So it's one of the principles of this is around something called social construction, because it's in relationship with others. And through the words we use and the questions we ask, that we actually can create new worlds, new relationships, and strengthen what we have. So that's some of the kind of background to where I'm coming from in terms of focusing on curiosity and appreciation. So, so in my podcast, I use a kind of framework, and I'll like to share that with you a little bit later on. But the main focus is on, and the people who were before me talking about LGBT issues in society, and specifically, you know, how they're working with it, that when we tell our stories and we learn about each other through our own stories, that's when we can truly connect. And so part of my podcast is to elicit the stories from people using particular kinds of question sets. And when we listen to people's stories, we have that capacity to be able to tap into and find out what really lights them up and helps them be the best that they can. So let me say a little bit now about the evolution of my show. So my significant other, who has just left the room, and I'm in the United States, so he's now my life partner and my business partner, Jürgen. He's in fact a digital strategist. So he works with people like me, authors, speakers, change agents, and small businesses on helping them get their digital strategy together. So he looks at the whole system from social media to web presence and so on. So I was kind of like one of his target clients. And he said to me, Robin, you've got so many assets, like you're a published author, you speak, you train, you've got training materials online, you've got a strong, kind of relatively strong social media presence. You know, you could really grow your list, thinking in the commercial sense, if you had a podcast. It had never occurred to me. So he advised me to start, since my business is sort of inquiry and asking questions and helping people grow, he said, why don't you kind of turn that into a podcast? And so I plucked up the courage and said, well, why not? So it was through his provocative proposition that got me started, and that was about a year or so ago. And so it's through this podcast that really has actually helped grow my list and grow my business. So it's not only through blogging, but now through podcasting, because part of my podcasting strategy is to write really good show notes. I see it as, I mean, to me, it's a kind of responsibility to help people who I'm interviewing to grow their business portfolio or get their message out. So I like to do really comprehensive show notes that really reflect them very well, and provide all the links so people can kind of then develop a relationship with them. And that's nothing new. That's what we do as podcasters. So I also have a good, I think it's a good online submission form, because when I started off, I did all the research, right? I found out, I looked at where people were coming from. I found their profiles. I wrote up introductions to them. I found all their links, their social media profiles, read all their books, and I did my due diligence so I could be truly honoring of my guests, and that took a lot of work. And what I found is that I was spending, the first year I was basically just focusing on the podcast, and the other parts of my business began to slide. So we created an online submission form, which has been a great time saver. So that online submission form invites people to describe themselves, put all their social media links in, where they've been published, what they've written, what their blog posts are, what their podcasts are, and so on. So I don't have to do all that. So that's a great help if some of you are perhaps new to podcasting and haven't come up with that little tactic to help you be more organized when it comes to being able to invest time in having the conversation or interviewing your guests. So so that was part of the stimulus for me to grow my podcast, or to start my podcast, I should say, with Jürgen, seeing it as a kind of an opportunity to gain a bigger presence in the world with my message. And because that resonated with me, because I wanted my message out in the world, I really truly believe in my mission, which is to create more agents for positive change in the world. So so that's worked. And so just a little bit about who I am now. And I mentioned that I facilitate, I coach, I train, I write, and so on. But essentially, I'm a learner. One of my highest values is learning. And if I could kind of hide away in a room with a pile of books or a pile of podcasts or videos, that's what I would love to do, because just learning is one of my greatest values. And as a learner, I also love teaching. And I'm an adjunct professor at a business school, Champlain College, up in Burlington, Vermont. And what I teach the business students there, it's a graduate course in positive organization development, is the advanced applications of this methodology that I'm talking about, appreciative inquiry. So what I teach there is how to use this in businesses. And I have used this in Google, and I have used it in Pfizer, and I have used it in some of the biggest corporations around the world. And I've used it in communities such as Jersey City, where I've worked with many neighborhoods, helping them come up with a vision about what they want their communities to look like, focusing on the assets and how they want. And I've interviewed a lot of these people so that we're spreading their messages as well. Potenziale Milionario sent me a gift. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. That's great. So yeah, keep those comments coming in. That's feeding me to keep going here on my solo trip. So I am a learner, and I am a teacher, and people tell me I'm very courageous. Somebody says, "Can you do this?" And I say, "Sure, why not?" So I'm adventurous and courageous. Hence, all the things I've experimented with in my life, and moving and coming and living to the States. I also see myself as a global citizen. I've actually lived in many countries. I've traveled the world since the age of 5, and I love travel. And I've learned a lot through living in many different countries. So it is important to really, for me, to experience all these different cultures, these different worldviews, and through that you actually grow. And I think it really helps us appreciate each other. So it comes back again to that state of curiosity and that state of appreciation. Thank you for helping me my hometown, New Jersey. Oh, you're so welcome. Yes, I've done like 4 or 5 workshops in New Jersey, and they've been mindful, and I've written about those too. So if you want to find out more, potencialmillonario.com, I'll be happy to kind of take this offline as well. So I consider myself very fortunate, having had the opportunity to experience all this diversity and personal growth. And knowing the value that it's given me, that's my mission, to spread that. And I find the podcast is one means to do that. So my message then as a podcaster and as a human being is to elevate and amplify this co-creative capacity that we have, and this ability that through our conversations, through our storytelling, through sharing aspirations, that we can all feel kind of empowered and feel more in control of our own lives. Now, it's not to say that as a positivity strategist that I'm glossing over the struggles we have. You know, it's through suffering and through adversity, these are the opportunities for our greatest growth. So we do address those too. But when we come from this worldview, it's what do we choose to focus on? So we can either focus on the things that don't work, the things that bring us down, that de-energize us, and where do we end up? We find more of that. Whereas if we were to start focusing on the things that give us life, energize us, give us greatest capacity, that's what we'll find more of. And with neuroscience now, we know that in our brains, that when we strengthen those different neural connections and the neurotransmitter between all those different neurons starts to fire, we actually have the capacity to grow this positivity muscle. So positivity is a skill that we can learn. And that's what I'm all about spreading through the podcast. So where I'd like to go now, is there anything coming in? No, keep those questions or comments coming in. That really does feed me. So I think that why I'm saying that curiosity and appreciation really helps us grow is through, as I mentioned, it helps with our brain cells. It opens our hearts. So it's all this mind, body, spirit connection. And the more we open up, the more we become creative. So when we are fearful, and so where I like to go with my guests is to find out, I say to them, you know, depending on the topic that we're going to address, I say, you know, that we've had high points and low points in our lives. And what I would like to hear from them is to share a story of a high point experience associated with whatever the topic is. So if we were talking about, for example, leadership development, I would invite my guest to say, you know, as a leader, you will have had high points and you will have had low points. Times when you're most proud and times and where you've had great failings and you've kind of been mortified and felt very humiliated. But for the sake of this exercise, why don't we focus on a positive story and let's go there. And so what that does, it starts to run the movie in your head and access those positive states. So when we access those positive states, and you can do this in conversation all the time, people begin to access the positive emotions, which then open up their capacity, widen their peripheral vision. They literally begin to see more, open up more, and be more available and more understanding for each other. Now, I did a TEDx talk on this very subject. It's called Playful Inquiry. Try this anywhere. If you were to Google that, you'll find it on YouTube, or if you went to my website, it's there too. And I tell the story in that talk, and I'll share a little bit of it now because it's kind of on topic, that when I get into a cab, I ask the cab driver, what's the best thing that's happened to you today? And invariably, the cab driver will kind of be silent for a while. And then I usually can see through the rear vision mirror that his eyes, it's usually a he, right? His eyes start to light up and twinkle comes in and they say, the best thing that happened to me today And then they start to tell me. Now, the best story I had with this was I was in New York City in a cab, and it was a beautiful spring day in New York. And the cab driver came from Ghana, because I asked him where he came from. He had the most immaculate, beautiful black dreadlocks, and he was so pumped up. He was such a positive guy. I thought that he'd probably done lots of Tony Robbins courses. So I asked him, I said, what's the best thing that's happened to you today? And he said, ma'am, the best thing that happened to me today is I told my girlfriend she can't have no big screen TV. I almost died. I didn't expect a response like that. And so we got into that conversation. And so we went on and on with this beautiful conversation. And he asked me what I did. And I told him what I did. And he said, ma'am, you do such good work in the world. You don't pay me today. So I actually had the opportunity to get a free cab ride in New York City, because he and I connected and engaged in a conversation that lit him up, and we learned a lot about each other. And I've done that hundreds of times. I've learned so much about people just by asking them a positively framed question. What's the best thing that's happened to you today? Now, I learned that from my professor when I was doing my positive change course, because he would ask his kids when they got home from school, what's up? What happened at school today? And he got nothing from his kids. And so then he asked them that very same question, and it changed the whole story. So when you think about, depending on, what the topic is, what you want to inquire into, if you're having a conversation with a guest on a podcast, if you start to think about positively framed questions, what that does to the brain, what that does to our emotions, what that does to our bodies, and how that opens us up to be more free, more playful, more curious, and more appreciative as the conversation starts to flow. So when I ask about a high point experience to open people up to the possibilities, and they tell me the story, then I can start to ask, and this is kind of like the lens that I go through, and it's also organic. I mean, my podcast practice is not to give questions out in advance. I like the spontaneity of it. I like the kind of impromptu. I like to be led by the person that I'm having the conversation or the interview with. So whatever they offer me, I will then take further. But this is an opener to kind of get people relaxed when they can talk about something positive, something they're proud of, something that they really feel that they want to share. And then my next kind of question might be, well, in your story, that great story that you just shared, and we kind of might develop that a little bit. I say, what do you value about yourself in your story? What do you really value about yourself? And that's kind of like, like out of left field. Often people don't get asked, what do they value about themselves? And so in that question, people ponder and think, and then they start to really tap into some of their own assets, their own strengths, their own capabilities, their own best assets about who they are as a person. And that just takes off in a whole new different direction when you start to talk about what it is that you can truly value about yourself. I mean, how often do you get asked, what do you really appreciate? What do you value about yourself? And so that takes us off in a new direction. So I'm really getting to understand, get deeper into who is the best of this person that I'm having this wonderful conversation with. And then, so we continue. Then the next question in my overarching framework is, what about other people in your story? What did you value about them? And so we start to learn about, the assets, the contributions, the values, the visions, the ideas that other people had that really made this a high point story for someone. So we're bringing in the wider community now. It's not just about me. It's really about how me as the guest speaking to you, Robin, but it's about how I began to it became inclusive of other people, what I valued about them. And so then it's, what did you appreciate? See, all this is curious and all this is about appreciation, valuing. What about the situation itself? So if I think about, think and looking at the LOL, that's great, thank you. Thinking about some of the stories and the work that I've done in Jersey City, where oftentimes adverse, people would come in with their entrenched positions. If they're wanting to create a new community initiative, you would have people with different positions that they want to be heard. I mean, that's the essential part of it. We all want to be heard. So if I'm working with a group in Jersey City and they're trying to envision a new park, for example, there'll be different stakeholders there who will have certain requirements, certain ideas about how they want the park to be. But if we can all kind of get on the same page and say, well, overarchingly, what would we like this park to be and why, what's important to me and what I value and what's important to you, we start to get people to listen to each other. So I do the same on the podcast. So they begin to see, well, how do we become more inclusive of bringing other people's values, other people's dreams and assets into this situation, and how can we design a better future for everybody? So that's kind of the whole appreciation piece. There is a structured framework that I've just outlined, and then it's overlaying people's individual personal stories, personal visions, and personal dreams into that. So I find this is a really nice framework to help people feel relaxed and feel heard in sharing their stories or what their message is. Now, many times, I interview authors. I mean, I started out interviewing people that in my community that I know, and maybe most of us have done that. Let me know if that's true for you, that, your first guests, if you do a guest show, are people that you know. And then I started to get publicists and authors reach out to me and say, would you interview this person? This is their book. Or would you interview me? This is my book. And, sure, I'm happy there to serve them and help promote their book if it's in line with my core message, which is about putting more positivity and appreciation into the world. So if it's aligned with my mission and my purpose, absolutely. And I found that I was getting so much of that it was getting too tough, as I said before, and it was becoming too much work to do all this preparation. So I actually peeled back a little bit and found that it's much easier for me to really reach out to the people that I'm identifying, whose work I can see is in line with the message that I have and is serving my audience, because they're the kinds of helps and supports that they need to grow their own businesses or their own communities or help themselves. Because I find that, very often it's individuals who are looking for their own growth and looking for strategies that can help them become more positive or more appreciative, and what can they do to overcome some of their own issues. So there are those people. And then there, as I mentioned earlier, there are people who are working in community or organizational context who want to grow themselves, their businesses and their teams. So for all of those people, if I can provide resources through my podcast to help them access those positive resources, that really serves me, and that's what I'm about. So it's all about taking people on a journey to discover the best of who they are. So let me, anything else here that's coming up? Not at the moment, that's fine, but keep it coming in. I find it very helpful. I'm just going to go back now and look at some of the things that I've identified for myself, and I'm sure it will resonate with many of you, about what I truly value about podcasting, both as an opportunity for my own personal growth, for offering value to my community and to others that I'm consciously growing this community. And the podcast has had some lovely reviews, and I get messages from all over the world. In fact, my book, which I'll hold up here, talking about a little bit of promotion, this is a book that is all about this methodology that I am known for, and it's not mine, as I said, I studied it, but it's all about these strength-based workshops. So it's being translated into Chinese as well, which is really cool. But that's a framework, this framework that I've outlined that I use as my interview guideline and is in the workbook. I have all kinds of people saying that it's a great resource for them to be able to tailor them for their own context. So I'm all about, I mean, really what drives me is providing the opportunity for people to find their own voice and grow themselves and have resources to help others grow. So I see there's a question, has a question above. Let me see. Is curiosity and appreciation connected to higher output, more productivity? Absolutely. That is the finding. So as I mentioned earlier, that through the study of positive emotions, we know that when we tap into those, curiosity and appreciation are positive emotional states. And when we tap into those positive emotional states, it changes us at the cellular level, and it changes the neural connections in the brain. And what we know through being able to access positive emotions, and they include, like curiosity, appreciation, gratitude, forgiveness, humility. There are many of them. And again, if you watch my TED talk, I invite the audience, and I get the audience to kind of tap into all these positive emotions. What that does, it actually opens up it opens us up to be more available for other people and to information and data coming into us. And so what that does then is enable us to be more creative, more playful. And let's face it, when we're more playful, when we are less tense, less egocentric, and we are much more productive. So there is definitely a strong link between positive emotions, these playful states that serve us, and creativity and productivity. I hope that is of help to you. That's good. Yeah, so any other questions? I would really appreciate those coming in. So back to the things that I value about myself and podcasting. And in fact, the podcast that Dave listened to is on it's positivitystrategist.com/PS22. That's where I apply this framework that I've outlined in today on myself. So I'm actually looking at my appreciation and the aspirations of being a podcaster, which it was way out of never thought that would happen to me, but hey, I did it and I'm loving it. So what I found is that, I was just checking the chat box again there, that I have found it really has strengthened relationships. So it's strengthened relationships through the people that I'm having conversations with the community that I'm engaging with. It's certainly helped me attract new audiences, people who are interested in growing their own capacity to be an agent for positive change, who want to change the way that they ask questions and moving away from what's the problem, what's wrong, to what's possible, what's working. So it's all about reframing. I mean, it's really coming through a lens of possibility, potentiality, and framing things from a strength-based, appreciative worldview. So I spend a lot of time helping people craft positively affirmative questions, because what we focus on grows, as somebody's already picked up. Thanks for that, Dave, for that link. What we know is that that what we focus on grows, and I've already kind of covered some of that. But another principle of this is the very first question we ask starts the change. So if you ask a deficit-based question, what do you do? What do you do to the energy of that person? Again, depending on the topic. So, you know, I'm not saying this is the be all and end all. This is just a perspective that I'm offering you, and it's a perspective that works for me. And it's not to say that I'm not aware that there are many other perspectives. But when you ask a deficit-based question like, what's wrong? Or or let me share with a story. It's probably better. So in one of the organizations that I was working with as a consultant, kind of facilitator, coach to a team, it was a big global bank on Wall Street, and they'd just done a rollout of a new software across the world. And any of you who are in software development or application development, I mean, years went into this. And it was really a big job, and it was obviously very stressful. And they're, you know, rolling up, and at the weekend, everyone worked, you know, the whole weekend to roll this out. And come Monday morning, everyone was exhausted. And the first thing, I was there as part of this meeting, the first thing the leader said was, well, there've been a number of weaknesses and things that went wrong, and we're just going to have to keep working on them, or something like that. You know, it wasn't exactly like that, but the tone was like that. Everyone, you can imagine what was the energy like in the room. So everyone's eyes went down to the floor, kind of a bit of shuffling. Nobody wanted to have eye contact with anybody else. You know, you kind of withdraw into, gosh, you know, it's the blame game. Whose fault is it? And it just shut down conversation. So this is back to the question about productivity. So when you go to these negative states, it shuts us down, because we go into this fear-based, I've got to protect myself mode, so we go very small, right? So you know, people were not open. The solutions were not flowing because people were exhausted and people were feeling like they had to defend themselves and pull their heads in, rather than, you know, sit up tall and offer potential solutions. They didn't want their heads chopped off. So after the meeting, I said to the leader, you know, maybe, you know, one of the ways that you could do this in future is to say, you know, acknowledge people for all the work that's gone on. You know, we had a successful rollout. Many things worked well, and there are other things that we could have done differently, and we need to change. Let's just start with the things that worked well. You know, what worked well here? What are you proud of? What did you hear the client say? What did you see your colleagues doing that really worked well? And what does that do to the energy in the room? It spirals upwards, right? There are these upward spirals of, wow, you know, we've got something to celebrate here. And so with that, people open up and people can start to offer, and they don't feel as much that their heads could be chopped off because they're fearful of offering something that is not going to be received well. That reminds me, coming from Australia, we have this cultural imprint, and it's called the tall poppy syndrome. I don't know if anyone's heard this. The tall poppy syndrome is that, I think it's shifting a little bit, but it's very different from the American culture, because, you know, the Australian culture is kind of more Anglo-Saxon, traditionally anyway, and that is you don't kind of self-promote, you don't big note yourself, because if you are a poppy that's taller than all the other poppies in the field, then you get your head lopped off. So in Australia, we say if you kind of are self-promoting and trying to stand out above the crowd will chop you down. And so this is kind of the adverse to what I'm saying here, that, you know, when you actually come from a place where we're all honoring and respecting and appreciating each other, it's okay to stand up and put your head out above the crowd, because people will applaud that, and that will encourage other people to do the same. So, you know, all these kind of things are part of our cultural imprints. So going back to this meeting that I was describing, I hope that illustrates to the question about opening us up to being more creative, more generous with our ideas, more productive, take greater risks. Now, if you're working in a bank or you're working in a pharmaceutical company, maybe, you know, the culture is adverse to risks because, you know, you're highly regulated, you've got all kinds of compliance issues you have to worry about, but you can at the same time honor the regulations and the compliance issues, and at the same time you can create a culture, an environment where people are free to be a little bit more playful, more positive, and more respectful of each other. So all of this comes out of this positive emotions and being open to share openly, honestly. This links, of course, to being authentic, to being having, working from your own integrity and to be truly who you are. So part of this message is when you can be truly who you are in the world, and you know that you're being valued and you're being heard and being respected, then you're encouraged to do more of the same. Thank you, Dave, for that message. I appreciate that. And also Gina, I appreciate it too. Thank you. I'd love to know more about you, Gina. So maybe we can kind of offline, we can engage. That would be lovely. You can find me on Twitter at RobbieCat. So I was saying that, bringing fresh perspective. So part of all of this message is that I think in the world today, one of the positive things that's coming out of everything that's going on in the world is that we need very much to value, or no, let me say it this way. I'm just seeing Gina said, I just took a pic of you asking my P's to join in. Great, thank you. So we recognize that leadership in this world today isn't just the prerogative of one person, that we don't have all the answers ourselves anymore. And the democratization of our media through podcasting, through blogging, through videos, through all these different channels that we have, that we are really democratizing our ideas. So we're showing that leadership, we all have the capacity for leadership. And it's through this collective leadership when we all have voice, and podcasting is helping that so much, where we, with a passion about something, invite other people with a shared passion. We can kind of share all this out, and before we know it, we're growing a community of practice. So it's a really significant piece of shifting the worldview, the perspective of leadership that we have in our world. Oh, I know you, Gina. I love your podcast. Yes, I love it. I've listened to it. This is great. Thank you for listening in to me. This is great. Yes, I love your podcast. Thank you. It's so great that you've identified yourself. Great. Okay, good. So that's another of the things that I've really valued about what I've learned out of podcasting, is really growing this my own appreciation and curiosity around all different fresh perspectives and how we're democratizing the world, and we're also really questioning what is true leadership today. A really important question that we're particularly facing not only in the United States but in every country. What is leadership? What is good leadership? I know I'm jumping all over the map here. I kind of feel like I'm just on, autopilot here. The only input I have here is from my chatting people. So expanding community. I think I've touched on that before. Just let me see the time here. Okay, we're doing well. So expanding my community, and as podcasters, that's one of the great benefits we have, to grow our community and to feel that collective consciousness that we can co-create together. So I think I have done my best at doing that because of our mentioned before. If I can honor my guests and do really beautiful show notes that get their message out in the world, they then will be proud to share those show notes and the show, and so that then kind of becomes self-managing and self-organizing, self-perpetuating, and so we kind of grow through that means by honoring and valuing each other. The fifth thing that I really value about podcasting, how it's helped me personally, and I believe helped my audience and my community. Oh, excuse me, I just have a little drink of water here. Is expanding the mission. So you can see all of this is kind of interconnected, right? So when you're passionate about your mission, you want to grow it. Podcasting really helps. I also find that particularly through that kind of question. The Dr. Vibe Show. Thank you so much. Excellent. I appreciate that. Great. I'll be clicking on these as soon as, in fact, if I click on it now, then I won't lose it. Awesome. So where was I going with that? Going deep. Yes. So with the question, the framework that I offered for asking these curiously focused, appreciative questions really facilitates the opportunity to go deeper rather than, just some superficial questions. And I think really the podcasts that really engage me are where we go in, we have really deep, I'm into the deep and meaningful stuff anyway, but where we can go deeper and really kind of connect to the true spirit, the essence of somebody. So I found that, podcasting is a way to do that with the right kinds of questions that we ask. And I'm a fan of, the Gimlet Man, Alex Bloomberg, and I did a course of his, and that really reinforced that worldview that I have, that when you get to that emotional, that pivot point, that's when you can really deeply connect to someone. So I really do strive to do that myself. Naturally, my point number 7 of the benefits of podcasting is it's the perfect modality for this mobile world that we live in. I don't do, sometimes, I'm a great walker and I need walking to think. So it's my walking meditations help me think and get my ideas together. And I actually have to struggle because most of the time I'd rather walk listening to a podcast, and sometimes I have to discipline myself and think, no, this is my reflection time. I'm not going to take anybody else's ideas in at the moment. I actually have to be there for myself. So sometimes it's a struggle, but yeah, podcasting is great. If you're doing mundane things like things around the house that I do, podcasts are great for that. So perfect modality, and all this because you're avid doers and listeners yourselves. I've mentioned this before. My 8th point of valuing podcasting is it has been enormous growth for me and developing myself, to be able to jump in and say, yes, today I will do this with 2 days notice was absolutely, and to be able to have the confidence that I can share what I want to share and go nonstop for 55 minutes is, I think, good growth for me. So I probably wouldn't have done that many years ago, even though I've been in the space of training and development and speaking. It's still a development, and technologically growing myself. Being able to edit using Audition software and to, have the tools and research this. Obviously, I do this with my digital strategist, better half. He helps me too. But I've really grown and developed myself and in my confidence through podcasting. Also developing an eye and ear for quality and detail. I've kind of touched on that about the quality of notes that I like to create, and just having that eye for detail, because part of my thing is to be the very best that you can be for the world. And so if you're the very best you can be for the world, then you model it. So as taxing as that can be, and as demanding as that can be, and the kind of the high expectations you can set for yourself, if that's your standard, that's your standard. So I make that my standard. One thing that I also mentioned here that's not my point number 10 was that with Jürgen, my significant other, we were actually in the mobile app development space for some time. So we already had the opportunity to understand what the mobile app marketplace is about and how you position yourself. So, for example, Positivity Strategist did attain #1 in New and Noteworthy in 2 sections when it was first launched. And we learned how to do that through positioning mobile apps in the app marketplaces. So, all of that kind of experience came out to play and made moving into podcasting a much easier transition. And my last point, and I recognize my time. Let me see my time. Oh, perfect. I did it. Was it began a new exciting adventure for me. And just being here today is almost like, the cherry on the cake to think that I can share this message with all of you awesome people out there. I feel very privileged and honored, and I hope I've been of service to you. And again, Dave, thank you so much for the invitation. It's been my absolute joy to do this.
Absolutely. Thank you, Robin. That was fascinating. Make sure you guys are heading over to positivitystrategist.com and checking out everything Robin is doing. And also make sure you follow her on Twitter at RobbieCat, ROBBIECAT. Thank you so much for joining in.
Thank you. Okay, I'll now check out bio